It's done. It is done. Gen is the second best player in the world. Playing solid is dead. It is dead. Mind games are all you need. They are all you need. Post Arslan Ash Tekken. Post Pakistan Emergence Tekken. That's what this episode is about. I'm pissed. I'm not pissed. But we're gonna go over Red Bull Kumite a little bit and just the biggest takeaways. Um, I think the biggest takeaway easily is that normal, solid, quote unquote Tekken is dead at the top. At the highest level, it's gone. So, for those who don't know, Red Bull Kumite was the first offline, non exclusive invitational international tournament pretty much since the pandemic, right? So, we had an LCQ filled with mainly American players, along with two Koreans in Rocks Infested and JDCR, and I believe one European in KWIS. Um, and then the top two of the LCQ, because Arslan Ash could not make it due to visa issues, unfortunately, go on to the top eight, where there are two groups randomly assigned, and they will be playing with the six other invited players: Anakin, Ni, Gen, Book, Super Akuma, Cuddlecore, and Ni again, Book, Super Akuma, Cuddlecore. Yeah, other six invited players, and doing a round robin in each group to determine the top four, and the top four two semifinals, each first to four, and then a grand final set first to five, single elimination, no losers bracket. If you lose, you're out. Let's start with the LCQ. So there was no official stream, but thank you to Sukin, there was a camera stream. So not video capture, but they walked around the venue and recorded the most requested matches. It was really great. Thank you to Sukin. Um, and we got to see like some offline Tekken action. And based on the LCQ, I mean, you would think it was 2016. You would think it was 2016, 2017. It was the exact same story. It was JDCR playing very compact, movement based, with punish based Tekken, obviously, download based, destroying the bracket, humiliating the bracket. Everyone who played Shadow infested the other Korean. It was borderline a joke. It was really like 2016 in that he was playing a very similar style of play as he's been playing for a long time and just demolished everyone. Yes, he's gotten better as Tekken 7 has progressed, but it was embarrassing from a perspective of JDCR is playing peak JDCR Tekken, which is almost unbeatable. But the fact that there aren't answers for JDCR Tekken in the entire LCQ, I'm not a top player, but from watching the matches, it's just why is JDCR not being studied more? Or if he is being studied more, like we know Shadow, and I'm not singling out Shadow, I'm singling out, pretty much every top player in LCQ. We know how great they are. They're the best players in the world. They're world class players. And JDCR was just on a whole nother level, and Rocks Infested was also on a whole nother level. I mean, Joey Fury, top five American, almost beat him. It was down to the wire, but we got to be a bit pissed. Like, it really felt like the international, before coronavirus, it really felt like the international scene was kind of reaching an equilibrium or kind of leveling out. The top in each country was relative to each other. There was Knee and Arslan in their own category, but then besides that, they were relative to each other. So the first point is I do not believe the American online or even the European, although we'll get to the exception in Super, the European online scene is quite at the over coronavirus. It made, I believe, the two respective scenes fall behind a bit. We all know that Korean internet is better, I guess, or their deathmatch culture and their training culture is better, I guess, but the international discrepancy widening to the degree it seems it has was really it was unfortunate. And so JDCR and Rocks Infested went through with JDCR winning. Again, it was a joke how much better JDCR was than everyone. And again, props to JDCR, right? Props to JDCR, but and we're gonna get to how JDCR did in the top 8, but it was just kind of crazy to think, man, coronavirus sucks. We were really, an international level of play was kind of climbing together, and it now seems there's a really giant gap that needs to be closed by America and most of EU Tekken or most of global Tekken, again compared now to Korea, Japan, and Pakistan. So as someone who supports the American Tekken scene, because it's the Tekken scene now I'm a part of, it was a bit I was a bit pissed. But anyway, beyond that, so what was the first takeaway there? The first takeaway was online Tekken during coronavirus. Obviously hindered the American and European region. I think it hurt them a bit. So then what's next? Let's go to the top 8, right? This was shocking. This whole tournament was shocking. And I'm not trying to sound like we didn't know a lot of what happened, but the degree to which we saw it yesterday was unprecedented. The skill gap between players who have changed the way they look at Tekken, the way they view Tekken before the emergence of Arslan Ash, and players who have not changed the way they play and look at Tekken after the emergence of Arslan Ash at the very highest level, that skill gap is bigger. It is bigger than the one between JDCR and the other top players in the LCQ, which doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. Mind games are all you need. So Group A was easily the group of death. It had Knee, Book, Anakin, and Gen. Going into the tournament, everyone knew Knee was the favorite. Everyone knew Gen was probably the second favorite. But Anakin and Book, they were like, I think definitely Anakin and Book were probably the next two. People didn't know JDCR was going to win the LCQ beforehand, but once he did, he obviously became the next run-up favorite. But I mean, that group was ridiculous, and then Group B was Super, Kuma, Cuddle, Infested, and JDCR. And based on the way JDCR was playing, it almost seemed like that group was just going to be JDCR like pretty easily, and then the toss-up between the next three. But so let's kind of break down the group stage matches and what we saw. Gen and Knee are post Arslan Ash top players. What does that mean? They play their entire game seemingly based off of just pure mind games. That's the only thing they focus on. Now I know you might be thinking, oh, but they punish everything perfectly and their movement's so amazing. At that level, that is has to be a given now. We're past the point in Tekken 7's development where that is separating top players. Because if you're not punishing and your movement is not, at a top level player level, then you're just not on that level anyway. So we're talking about the top, right? We're not talking about the vast majority of Tekken players. We're just like, again, from like a sports analyst kind of perspective is what we're taking. Um, Ni and Gen humiliated the people they played. Um, Eris's stream, or Eris himself, was talking about how Fakumram and I think Jack look like they're from totally different games. But it's not just the design. It was the way Gen was playing versus the way Anakin was playing. And it's not just because Gen is better, it's because it's an entirely different style of play that has been brought about, again, by that has been forced out by the emergence of Arslan Ash, where it's all mind games. So you don't even, it used to be a separation in the top of Tekken between feel-based players, so like Anakin, feel/momentum-based players, like Joey, and then just strictly pure solid fundamental players like JDCR, even though JDCR is also partially feel-based, but like JDCR and, you know, Ni at the time. And there was this kind of big divide. But the new dominant style of play transcends both of those. It says those are as fundamental as block punishment. Those aren't a style of play anymore. That's just fundamentals. Your style of play emerges now from your mind game capabilities. You might say, when you're watching Gen, wait, all those back ones, Fakromon launch punishable moves out in the open with no precedent, seemingly, that's an entirely mind game based decision. There's no foundation of that in solid fundamentals. And because he did it in all of his games, there's no foundation of that in momentum based play. Because when he was losing or when he was winning, he incorporated techniques that are only described to I'm psychologically dominating my opponent in some metaphysical sense. It's almost telepathic. And I keep going back to this. I asked Arslan, what is the most important aspect of Tekken? Movement, punishment, knowledge, mind games. He said mind games, and he said it wasn't even close. Like, and I know he thinks all those other things are givens at his level, but it's so clear that there is a paradigm shift at the top of Tekken, and if you are not, who beat Arslan in Evo Japan? It was Boa Love. He is a totally mind game based player, partially momentum, but a lot of how he plays is just strictly based off of mind games and pure hyper speed data collection. And I think the same. I mean, how did Jimmy beat Arslan? Jimmy beat Arslan with very character specialist techniques, right? And so, what do you need to win? Mind games, mids, and combos. If you don't drop your combos, if you use mids all the time, you pick a character with oppressive mids, Fakumram 3+4, Lydia at forward forward 2, Steve down forward 2, and you have mind games to connect with your opponent on a on a comic book level ridiculousness wavelength or whatever you want to call it, like that's how you win. At the again at the top. So what's the skill gap between people who have adapted the style of play and people who seemed to have not yet? I understand JDCR was tired because he had to play through the LCQ, but there was not a moment in his match with Nee where it looked like he had a sliver of a chance. Nee 4-0'd him in the top four, and I mean, it was like they were playing two different games. I think the players who clearly learned from, again, not how the Pakistani style of play should influence the general Tekken 7, like their general Tekken 7 approach, because clearly you can still have your own identity, right? Gen is still a very fast-paced player. Nee is still more of a more slow-paced player. Nee still takes relatively fewer risks, though the quote-unquote disrespecting of frames, Nee has certainly incorporated that a lot more into his game. But I think Nee, Gen, and Super Akuma, I'm sure having studied Weiss Honey's gameplay for, you know, extensively, and the fact that, Akuma does the combo. It does combos. Mind games, mids, and combos are all you need. The notion of like Nee doesn't even play this quote unquote perfect solid Tekken anymore. It's just done. The notion of character matchups is even becoming less relevant, in my opinion. I don't believe Nee counterpicks characters anymore. The reason why nobody knows what character Nee is going to pick is because he's not counterpicking characters, in my opinion, anymore. He's counterpicking players. He's counterpicking players. I believe Arslan Ash is still probably the best player in the world, but I think that I suspect the gap between him, Nee, Gen, probably Super Akuma, and any other top player who has shifted their entire focus essentially to just harnessing their ability to understand an opponent and their ability to impose their own will onto an opponent. I think the skill gap between them is probably closed a bit. But the skill gap between those players and players who seemingly are playing 2018, 2017, 2016 style of Tekken, it seems to not be good enough based on this one tournament. We'll see what happens in CEO, but it was striking. Almost all the games between these players and those players who, again, that I mentioned, who have almost all the games between Super Kuma, Gen, Nee, and all the other players. Again, no Cuddle got a game off Super Kuma. That was crazy. Shout out Cuddle, that was sick. But there were a lot of blowouts. There were a lot of 3-0s. It was a bloodbath for most of these games. Gen Anakin was one of the biggest bloodbaths I've ever seen. And it's not because Anakin's not capable of beating Gen at some point in the future. It's just because it really seems like they're playing a different game. And I believe, it will take some form of hyper training, like, and to an uncomfortable degree, to catch up to these other players if you're not willing to adapt the mindset, or not the mindset, but the style of play to some degree that the Pakistanis introduced of it's just a mind game based game. Frames, movement, punishment, momentum, these are all aspects of the game that if they're not, you can't base your playstyle off of them. They have to just be givens. That's the level of Tekken that these top players are playing. It was just crazy to watch. And congratulations again, of course, who, I mean, so well deserved. So well deserved. I think is firmly the second best player in the world. Again, you have to beat Arslan to really claim it. Um, but until then, thank you for listening. I know this seems like a bit of a reactionary, bit of a freak out episode, but it was really shocking. So just wanted to get it out there. Thank you for listening. Yeah, till next time.